Why do people say gender is a social construct? Basically, the rules for gender identity and expression are ones that we as a society have constructed. Things like women have long hair, wear makeup, paint their nails, etc., are all socially constructed ideas. It's basically how we expect given people from a group to act. Of course, men can do all of these things while still being men, just as women could avoid doing these things and still be women. The key bit here is that these rules aren't fixed. It's not like there's a makeup gene that only women have. They're just rules we made up. From what I understand, biological sex is male, female, while gender is how you present yourself in regards to your biological sex. People are exploring gender as a spectrum, which is really interesting because it challenges the idea that biological sex is intrinsically involved in our individuality. People will slander me for this, but whatever. I'm a cis woman almost in my 30s, and back when I was 16-17 I thought I was trans. Like straight up felt like a man. After a few years I came to realize this feeling that I was a boy came from the idea that exists in society about men being strong, fierce, etc. I was a timid girl who got bullied a lot, so I thought the only way to be strong was to be a man. Because that's what I had learned from society. I'm not saying every trans person is going through a phase like I did. What I'm saying is, it shows to prove how much society impacts how we feel and think about ourselves. I support trans and non-binary people because they're challenging a useless status quo in my opinion. Well, sex is biology. It's the body we are born with. Gender is created by society. Society deems what is masculine and what is feminine, i.e. behaviors and traits that the majority of people decide represents what gender, etc. These are often linked with biological sex, but more often than not are based on tradition and power dynamics. Because nothing in our biology says girls like pink and boys like blue. Because it's actually exceptionally difficult to find non-biological attributes that are associated with gender. Most of our ideas about gender come from culture. Even something as basic as how we pee. Most cultures associate peeing standing up with men. But there is actually at least one small tribe which found this bizarre when meeting anthropologists for the first time in their tribe. Women pee standing and men sit. Virtually everything non-biological that we associate with men or women is a construct of society. Hence the difference between gender and sex. Because the idea of gender was created by humans as a way to categorize us. A social construct is a consensus made collaboratively on an aspect of reality. Biological sex was the aspect of reality. Gender was the collaborative consensus humans created about biological sex. The sociological definition of gender is society's implicit belief that an individual of a certain sex is expected to perform certain duties and behave a certain way. Our society doesn't believe eunuchs are a gender, just men without penises. However, the ancient Egyptians believed that eunuchs were the gender of the priests. If you have no penis, it was because you devoted your life to serving the gods and the temples. In fact, being an eunuch but not a priest would be deeply disrespectful to them. They're a stickler for people fitting in their proper place. https://www.who.int/health-topics/gender #tab #1. It partially is. It's more obvious if we're talking about like 100 years ago when women weren't supposed to wear pants, and men didn't have long hair and so on. A lot of stuff associated with gender is stuff we created. It's just that most of it goes along with our instincts too. Like we invented dolls, but dolls play into girls' maternal instincts. It's like society created a mold for how the sexes should act. And most people are totally fine with it. They fit into that mold naturally. But some people don't fit. And some people say they feel much more comfortable in the other mold. Gender is a system of social expectations that describes how people are expected to behave in society based on their sex class. Gender roles are the social positions people are expected to assume based on their sex class. Gender is oppressive when people are subtly or explicitly penalized for deviating from their gender roles. These standards are therefore socially enforced. Some people believe they have an innate gender identity that refers to a strong preference for one set of gendered expectations over the other. Other people doubt the existence of an innate gender identity or disagree that failing to align to the gendered expectations for your sex is a pathology that needs to be treated. Gender is related to biology because there are broad differences in the average distribution of traits between the sexes. Men tend to be larger and more physically robust on average. So labor jobs are gendered male. Women give birth and nurse children. So childcare is gendered female. The problem with gender is not that it describes these tendencies, which is fine, but that gendered expectations are used to enforce narrow possibilities on everyone. I would say once we put a role in society based on our gender, we make it a social construct. Because gender roles are a social construct. Most things are a social construct. As a society we agree upon something. Because different cultures recognize different gender presentations. Genders linked to age. And entire genders that aren't recognized in the West. A map of gender-diverse cultures. For 600 years, gender was a synonym of sex, and then some people unilaterally redefined it as social roles associated with sex. This is the source of the confusion. And I suspect they intend to cause the confusion because some of them seem to think sex is also a social construct. Because the idea of what goes along with having certain physical traits is socially constructed. Having a dick is a real physical thing. Believing that the dick determines whether or not you should wear nail polish is not a physical thing. Saying something is a social construct isn't a fancy way of saying it's fake. Money is also a social construct. You still have to pay for stuff. Frogs have sex. But a frog can't be a woman. Because however we define the social role of woman, it's still being socially defined. And frogs aren't part of human society that way. Doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on for this one. TLDR, the easiest way to think about this is, when you think of the word man and all of the traits associated with that word, would you define it differently now than you would 200 years ago? The science hasn't changed biologically, so the societal view of it must have. Biologically we still define it the same. But socially its definition is probably not identical. If we can round up 1,000 people and ask them to define something, they all give different answers. And they are all still correct. Then it's probably a social construct. The longer version. Until about the 1940s, the words sex and gender were used interchangeably. And they were so interchangeable that no one even used gender to define sex. Gender was only said for its other grammatical definitions. I can't say what the official definitions, literal Webster Dictionary definition, were before that time since I couldn't really find reliable sources. Essentially though you had pretty much everyone using them interchangeably because everyone assumed masculine and feminine traits were only found in their respective sexes. So there was no reason to distinguish the two words. Around the 1940s a psychologist basically acknowledged that the two are not always reliant on the And while it might be more common to find certain traits in certain sexes, you don't only find masculine traits in men or feminine traits in women. Ever since, you have people wanting to truly define themselves accurately according to how they view themselves in society, and society being more accepting of it. The last part is probably most key, because obviously these out-of-place traits have always been common, just not socially accepted. This last part might apply to you like it did to me. I'm not sure if it was because of growing up in the South, but I was still explaining these differences a couple of years ago to friends that were really smart and educated. Some people simply just don't know that they are two different words because of how they were raised. Also, a lot of Christians I know deny these aspects because they think we're somehow manipulating sex, and God created only two sexes. Obviously, the more reasonable Christians in my life understand the difference. An American's view of what constitutes a manly man is different than what a French person's view is of a manly man, which can be different than what an Egyptian considers a manly man. Do the men have beards? What kind of soap, shampoo is normal for a man to use? What is a normal outfit for a man to wear? How is that man supposed to treat animals, children, service workers, women? What is the role of a husband, father in the family, etc.? While there may be some overarching themes to these questions, there are going to be some nuances and differences based on the culture that they grew up in or are living in now, which lends to the idea that sex may be biological but gender is a social construct, i.e., the idea that an assigned male at birth that identifies as a male his entire life remains the same across all cultures. But how he sees himself and interacts with the world will be dependent on how the environment, culture, society he grew up in shaped his worldview and how he sees himself in the grand theme of things. One example is the idea that American men think it's feminine, bad to wash their ass, but French men think it's healthy, masculine to wash their ass. Both are men, but how they view their own masculinity was developed through the culture around them. Gender is different than biological sex. Sexual dimorphism exists in virtually all mammals. Gender in its simplest form is, human males are men and men act this way, and human females are women and women act this way. Some things are gendered and some aren't. Clothing is. Houses aren't. Some things are gendered more strongly than others. Skirts are strongly gendered to women. Baseball caps are weakly gendered toward men. Some things gender differently over time. Long hair in 1955 America was strongly gendered. Today less so. All of these things are based on society. Some common confusion or fallacies on both sides. 1. Biosex and gender aren't the same as sexuality and often have nothing to do with each other. 2. People can't perform physical miracles and choose to be what they biologically aren't, because they don't mean gender identity, i.e. whether you feel that you are a man, woman, or something else. They mean the whole of everything surrounding gender identity. Dutch as the idea that women clean and cook and men don't have emotions. Women are universally bad at maths. Men only ever want to have short hair. Things of this ilk. Things that even if there is some biological basis for them to a degree have been taken as a whole by the society and warped by the society's imaginings of how things have to be.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. TheTrueMadgenta is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.